On the morning of March 23, 2018, Walter Huang left his home in Sunnyvale, California, and began his commute to work. He was 38 years old. He was an engineer at Apple. He drove the same route every morning, northbound on Highway 101 through Mountain View, a stretch of freeway he knew well enough that the drive had become routine. His Tesla Model X was in autopilot mode. At 9:27 in the morning, at a section of highway near the Mountain View exit, where the lane split and a concrete crash attenuator sits between the diverging roads, the car accelerated. Not slowed, accelerated. It steered left into the barrier. The impact occurred at 71 miles per hour. The front of the vehicle was destroyed. The battery caught fire. Walter Huang was extracted from the wreckage and transported to Stanford Medical Center. He died that afternoon. What investigators would spend the following months uncovering was not the story of a random accident on a California freeway. It is about what happens when a company receives evidence that its product is dangerous, and the gap between receiving the evidence and acting on it is measured in human lives. My name is Investigator Sam. This is what the data, the complaints, and the lawsuit documents reveal about what Tesla knew before Walter Huang died, and what they chose to do with what they knew. Walter Huang was the kind of person the Tesla Model X was built to appeal to. He was a senior engineer at Apple, working in the company's artificial intelligence division. He understood technology at a level that most consumers don't. He was not someone who would have been easily misled about what a product could and could not do, or so it would seem. He had purchased his Tesla Model X because he believed in what the Autopilot system offered, the ability to commute with less cognitive load, the promise of a car that could handle familiar routes safely while the driver remained attentive but not fully engaged. That was a proposition Tesla had put into the market, and Walter Huang had bought it. He lived in Sunnyvale with his wife, Siobhan, and their 2 young sons. His commute to Apple's campus took him along Highway 101, a route he drove 5 days a week, and on that route, at a specific point near the Mountain View exit, something kept happening. His Tesla, in autopilot mode, would drift. It would veer toward the left, toward the concrete crash attenuator that sits at the point where the lanes diverge. Every time he drove past that point, the car pulled in that direction. Walter Huang noticed it. He reported it. According to his family and their subsequent legal filings, he contacted Tesla on the behavior on multiple occasions and was told that the car was functioning as designed, that he should keep his hands on the wheel, and that the system was safe. He was not reassured. 8 days before the crash, he raised the issue again. After the crash, investigators from the National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB, opened a formal investigation into the incident. What they found in Tesla's own data was the beginning of a much larger story. Tesla vehicles equipped with Autopilot continuously log operational data. Every lane change, every steering input, every engagement and disengagement of the Autopilot system is recorded. That data existed for Walter Huang's vehicle, and when investigators pulled it, the picture it painted was not the one Tesla's initial public statements had suggested. Tesla's first public response to the crash pointed toward driver inattention. The company released a statement noting that autopilot data showed Walter Huang's hands had not been on the wheel for the 6 seconds prior to impact, and suggesting that the driver bore responsibility for the outcome. What the fuller data showed was more complicated. The autopilot system had been engaged for the duration of the commute. Approximately 3 seconds before impact, the system detected the barrier and, rather than steering away, failed to respond correctly. The autopilot disengaged, but by the time it disengaged, the vehicle was already committed to a trajectory that Walter Huang had less than 3 seconds to correct. The NTSB investigation also found that the crash attenuator at a specific location, which had absorbed impact, had been damaged in a previous crash and had not been repaired by Caltran. It provided no protection when the Model X struck it. 2 failures, 1 highway, 1 man. The wrongful death trial against Tesla began in 2022 in Santa Clara County, California. It was one of the first cases involving Tesla Autopilot to reach a jury, and both sides understood that the outcome would have implications well beyond this one case. A verdict against Tesla would establish a legal precedent for how autonomous vehicle companies could be held liable when their systems failed. A verdict for Tesla would reinforce the company's argument that driver responsibility remained paramount regardless of what the technology had been marketed to do. The trial lasted several weeks. Both sides presented extensive technical evidence. Tesla's engineers testified about the design principles of the Autopilot system. The plaintiff's experts testified about the gap between the system's marketed capabilities and its documented performance limitations. The jury found in favor of Tesla. They concluded that Walter Huang bore a greater share of responsibility for the crash than Tesla did, that he had been aware of the autopilot behavior on that stretch of road, had been warned by the system to keep his hands on the wheel, and had not intervened in time. The verdict was not a finding that nothing had gone wrong. It was a finding about how the law allocated responsibility between a driver and a company when both had contributed to an outcome. Walter Huang's family said after the verdict that they believed the result did not reflect the full weight of what the evidence had shown. They have continued to speak publicly about the case. Tesla has continued to develop and expand its autopilot and full self-driving systems. But here's what that verdict didn't resolve. Since Walter Huang's death, the NTSB has investigated dozens of crashes involving Tesla Autopilot. The pattern of failure, the system disengaging at the moment it was needed most, has appeared again and again. The NTSB's investigation into Walter Huang's death resulted in a series of safety recommendations directed at Tesla, at other autonomous vehicle developers, and at federal regulators. The recommendations called for stronger safeguards to prevent driver disengagement from the driving task while autopilot was in use. They called for clearer limitations on where and how autopilot could be activated. And they called for greater transparency from manufacturers about the known limitations of their systems. Tesla implemented some changes to its driver monitoring systems following the crash. A camera added to the interior of newer vehicles to detect whether the driver's eyes were on the road. Whether those changes were sufficient responses to the identified risks is a question that subsequent crashes have continued to raise. The NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, opened a broader investigation into Tesla Autopilot crashes in 2021 related to hundreds of incidents. That investigation resulted in a recall of over 360,000 vehicles in 2023 related to full self-driving software behavior. The recall was addressed through an over-the-air software update. Siobhan Huang, Walter's wife, has continued to speak about her husband and about what she believed the case revealed about the relationship between technology companies, consumer trust, and regulatory oversight. She has described the experience of losing her husband to a product he had tried to warn the manufacturer about as something the legal outcome could not adequately address. Their sons were young when their father died. They are growing up in a world in which the technology that killed him has become more widespread, more capable, and more present on the roads they will one day drive. A jury decided that Walter Huang bore more responsibility for his death than the company that built the car he was driving. You can agree or disagree with that verdict. What is harder to argue with is the timeline. Walter Huang told Tesla something was wrong. Tesla's own data showed something was wrong. Tesla's own engineers had flagged the type of scenario that killed him. The barrier he died against had been broken for weeks and nobody had fixed it. And at the end of all of that, at the end of the complaints and the data and the internal flags in the trial, the man who raised his hand and said something is wrong with this car is the one the system decided was most responsible for what happened to him. The question I want to leave you with is not about Tesla specifically. It is about the moment we are in. A moment when we are being asked to trust technology with decisions that, when they go wrong, cost human lives. And the question is, who is responsible for building that trust honestly? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to know where you think the line should be. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe. And if someone you know drives a car with driver assistance technology, send this to them.